when an exhausted mechanic stopped to help a broken-down truck on a deserted highway, he had no idea the man inside was a forgotten war hero or that this act of kindness would unlock a reward beyond his imagination. What began with a wrench and goodwill would lead to a future filled with honor, opportunity, and a life changed forever. You're watching Storytelling and Beyond, where everyday hearts meet extraordinary fates. It was nearing dusk when Jake Miller, a scruffy mechanic with tired eyes and oil-streaked hands, spotted a beat-up pickup truck stranded on the side of the road. The truck's hood was open like a cry for help, and beside it stood an elderly man in a faded army jacket, leaning heavily on a weathered cane. His face was carved with time and hardship, but his posture upright, disciplined, hinted at a past that demanded respect. Jake slowed his rattling van and pulled over. His toolbox clanked in the back as he stepped out, wiping sweat from his brow with the sleeve of his flannel. He'd just wrapped up a long shift at his modest repair shop and had barely enough money in his wallet for dinner. But something about the man, maybe the way he stood, or the silence in his eyes, made Jake stop without second thought. "You all right, sir?" Jake asked, walking toward him. The older man looked up, his jaw set firm. "Engine gave out." "She's old, like me." Jake chuckled. "Well, let's see what I can do for the both of you." He popped the hood and began diagnosing the problem. Rusted wires. Leaking coolant. Misfiring cylinders. It was a miracle the truck had made it this far. As he worked, the man watched in silence, occasionally shifting his weight on the cane. Jake broke the ice. "Name's Jake. I run a small repair shop down in Pineville." "Marcus Donovan," the man replied. "Used to serve." Jake paused. "Army?" "Marine Corps." 30 years. "Retired." "Or?" "Forgotten, maybe." Jake said nothing. Just nodded. In that moment, the silence between them was fuller than any conversation. Jake kept working, sweat dripping from his brow, hands black with grime, using spare parts from his own van to rig a temporary fix. He even gave Marcus his last unopened bottle of water. 2 hours passed. Jake finally slammed the hood shut and turned the ignition. The old truck sputtered, then roared to life. Marcus stared at the wheel, stunned. "You brought her back." Jake grinned. "Not for long, I'm afraid. You'll need a full overhaul. But she'll get you home." Marcus looked at Jake, really looked at him. "You didn't have to stop." Jake shrugged. "You wore the uniform. Least I could do." Marcus reached into his coat, pulled out a weathered notepad, and scribbled something. "Your shop address?" Jake gave it. Marcus folded the note carefully and tucked it away. "Don't expect much," Jake added with a sheepish grin. "It's just me, a few tools, and a coffee machine that only works when it wants to." But Marcus just nodded, smiling softly. Sometimes, it's the people who give the little things that deserve the most. They shook hands, and Marcus drove away, taillights glowing like two fading stars in the falling night. Jake stood by the road a moment longer, unaware that the man he had just helped wasn't just any veteran and that his quiet act of kindness had just opened a door he never even knew existed. 2 days later, Jake Miller stood behind the counter of his cramped garage, wiping his hands on a rag while listening to the slow drip of a leaky pipe. It was a slow morning, just a tire rotation for a neighbor's minivan and an oil change scheduled for later. The worn-out open sign flickered in the window like it, too, had grown tired of waiting. Jake leaned against the counter, sipping lukewarm coffee when a sleek black SUV pulled up in front of the garage. It was the kind of car that never showed up in his part of town. The tinted windows gleamed under the sun, and the paint looked untouched by dust or time. The door opened and a sharply dressed man in a tailored navy suit stepped out. He walked toward the shop with the posture of someone who didn't ask for directions, the kind of person who had people to ask for him. Jake put down his cup, slightly uneasy. "Can I help you?" The man gave a firm nod. "Jake Miller?" "Yeah. I'm with Donovan Holdings," he said, handing Jake a business card embossed in gold. "Mr. Marcus Donovan asked me to find you." Jake blinked, recognizing the name immediately. "The old man?" With the truck? Yes, the man said, his face unreadable. He was deeply moved by what you did for him. He's asked that you come with me. He'd like to speak with you personally. Jake was stunned. Look, I don't know what this is about, but Mr. Donovan insists. And he doesn't take no for an answer. He said you'd understand once you got there. Jake hesitated. His hands were still stained with oil, his boots worn from long shifts. He looked down at his clothes, then back at the car. I'm just a mechanic, he muttered. The man smiled for the first time. Mr. Donovan believes you're much more than that. Jake grabbed his jacket, still not fully believing what was happening. The SUV's door closed behind him with a quiet thud, and within moments, they were cruising past neighborhoods Jake had never entered: wide, tree-lined streets, gates taller than houses, estates with circular driveways and trimmed hedges that looked too perfect to be real. They pulled up to a mansion that looked like it belonged on the cover of a luxury magazine. Stone pillars, high-arched windows, and a circular fountain that glistened in the sun. Jake stepped out slowly, feeling like he'd just stepped into another world. Inside, the air smelled of cedar and polished marble. A butler led him through a grand hallway and into a study lined with books, war medals, and pictures of men in uniform. Sitting behind the desk, dressed in a pressed shirt and still with that same sturdy cane by his side, was Marcus Donovan. He stood, not fully, but enough to greet Jake with respect. Jake, Marcus said with a firm nod. You fixed more than my truck that night. Jake approached slowly, glancing around in disbelief. Sir? I don't understand. Marcus pointed to the leather chair across from him. Sit. I've got something to show you. He slid a folder across the desk. Jake opened it slowly, his eyes scanning over a contract. No, not a contract, a partnership agreement. Marcus's company was offering him full backing to start a premium auto repair and restoration business, with Jake's name on the door. Jake looked up, mouth slightly open. Why me? Marcus leaned back. Because when I was stranded and broken, you stopped. You gave without asking, helped without judging. You didn't see a washed-up veteran, you saw a man who needed help. That kind of heart deserves more than thanks. Jake's hands trembled slightly as he held the paper. This was more than just money. It was trust. It was belief. And it was only the beginning. A week later, Jake stood inside a pristine new building downtown: glass walls, polished floors, custom hydraulic lifts, and a logo freshly stenciled across the entrance: Miller and Donovan Auto Restoration. He still couldn't believe any of it was real. Gone were the flickering lights and dripping pipes of his old garage. Now, he had a full staff, state-of-the-art equipment, and clients lining up, many by word of Marcus Donovan's personal recommendation. But with sudden success came unfamiliar attention and hidden shadows. One evening, as the staff locked up, Jake sat in his new office, reviewing schedules. A soft knock at the door pulled him from his thoughts. It was Rachel, his former assistant from the old garage, whom he had tried to reach a few times but never heard back from until now. Rachel, he said, surprised. Where've you been? She stepped in, her eyes a mix of worry and hesitation. I need to talk to you. It's about Brian. Jake's brows furrowed. Brian had been his right-hand man for 2 years, loyal, trustworthy, or so he thought. Rachel sat, voice low. I overheard Brian on a call. He's been funneling client payments into a separate account. He used your trust to access systems during the transition. I didn't know how to tell you, but I couldn't stay silent. Jake's heart sank. Brian? The man he'd trusted through thick and thin? I have proof, Rachel said, pulling out a flash drive. I copied what I could from the old network before I left. Jake stared at the drive, a tightness in his chest. This was betrayal, not from a stranger, but from someone who'd grown with him in the trenches. The next morning, he confronted Brian in the break room. The man's face went pale when Jake laid the evidence on the table. You think because I'm just a mechanic, I wouldn't notice? Jake's voice was calm, but sharp. Brian tried to spin his story, but Jake had already called the authorities and Marcus's legal team. Within hours, Brian was escorted out, handcuffed, with staff looking on in shocked silence. It was the first real scar on Jake's dream, but it taught him something important. Success didn't just bring opportunity, it also attracted the wrong kind of people. Later that evening, Marcus called. "You handled it like a man, Jake. With your head, not your fists. You're not just building a garage, you're building something people will believe in. Don't let one betrayal dim that." Jake stood on the rooftop of the new shop as the sun set, watching the golden light spill over the city. The betrayal stung, but his vision was stronger. He wouldn't let anyone tear down what kindness, integrity, and grit had built. 2 months had passed. Jake's business was thriving beyond anything he'd imagined. Clients came not only for the expert restorations but for the heart of the place, the kindness, honesty, and soul that Jake poured into every job. But nothing prepared him for what was about to happen one rainy afternoon. A battered pickup rolled into the garage lot, engine stuttering, frame rusted, but something about it felt oddly familiar. Jake walked out, wiping his hands with a rag, as the driver stepped out, limping slightly, dressed in civilian clothes, yet unmistakably the same weathered man he had helped on the roadside months ago. "Marcus?" Jake blinked, surprised. The man smiled. "That's Mr. Donovan today," he joked, then handed Jake a sealed envelope. Inside was a formal invitation, embossed gold trim, rich cream paper, to a National Veterans Gala. But what stunned Jake wasn't just the invite. It was the mention of an award. The National Valor and Community Honor, to be presented to Jake Miller, for exemplary courage and compassion shown to a decorated war hero. "I didn't do it for this," Jake murmured. "I know," Marcus said. "But people should know your story. You saw me not as a burden, but as a man in pain. And then you gave without asking. That kind of heart doesn't go unnoticed." The night of the gala arrived. The ballroom was draped in flags and lined with rows of men and women in uniform. Cameras flashed, and Jake stood awkwardly in a tailored suit that didn't quite feel like him. When his name was called, the applause shook the room. But Jake didn't speak of himself. He took the stage, holding the plaque in his hands, and looked out at the crowd. "This isn't about me," he said. "It's about remembering that dignity shouldn't have a price. That kindness isn't weakness. That one act of compassion can change everything." His voice trembled slightly as he ended. "I didn't think I'd get anything for helping a man stuck on the roadside that night. Turns out, I got a future I never even dreamed of." The room stood in silence, then erupted in applause, some clapping, others wiping their eyes. Back home, Jake placed the award not on his desk, but on the wall of the garage, where every customer could see it, not as a symbol of success, but as a reminder of where it all began. And as he turned off the lights for the night, he whispered to himself, "One moment of kindness, that's all it takes." For more powerful, emotional journeys like this, don't forget to subscribe to Storytelling and Beyond.